Saturday was silent, surely it was through. But since when has impossible ever stopped to you? If Friday's disappointment is Sunday's empty tomb, but since when has impossible ever stopped to you? Yeah. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling. And this is the praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling. A Pentecostal fire, stirring something new. You're not gonna run out of miracles anytime soon. Yeah, resurrection power, it runs in my veins too, yeah. And I believe there's another miracle here in this room. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling. Oh. And just ask the stone that was rolled at the tomb in the garden, what happens when God says to move. Oh, and I feel him doing it now. I feel him doing it now. I feel him doing it now. Do it now. Do it now. And this is what he says. Live, live. Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Live, live. Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Live, live. Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Live, live. Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling. Oh, this is the praise make a dead man walk again. And open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again.
You can clap for him, that's good. Music has been one of the commonalities of human cultures. Even if you would say about yourself, and I've heard lots of people say, you know, I'm not really a music person. Even if that's how you would describe yourself, you'd have a hard time arguing that music is not important. It's more than entertainment, although it is entertaining. It's actually a component of the fabric of every community and every generation. This might look like some museum-worthy relic to you, and if that's what you think, you would be right. It is in there. But it's more than just some archaeological discovery. This is the Hurrian hymn, and it is the oldest record of music in human history that we've discovered so far. It's actually a hymn that was written about 3,400 years ago, and all this scribble that you and I can't possibly decipher is not just the words to the song, but also the musical score and instructions on how to play it on this 9-stringed instrument called a samum. Music provides us more than entertainment. It's also a way that we learn. Most of us learn the alphabet by singing a song, by singing the ABCs. Sometimes we use music to reinforce a value that we want sort of deeply instilled in us. When my grandkids were little and coming along, Susan and I wrote this little lick that we would sing to our grandkids. And we would say, we're gonna go to Papa's house. Papa's house, Papa's house. We're going to go to Papa's house and have a fun day. And then we would sing it all over again. We'd put Ng's name in it. If you don't know what Ng means, I'll tell you some other time. But for nearly 5 years, some or all of our grandkids have come over to Papa and Ng's house most every week. And every week still, we sing this song at least once. Now, oftentimes, they're the ones that bring it up. It's reinforcing something that we wanted to make sure our grandkids knew, that Papa and Ng's house would be the fun house. And can I just tell you, y'all, we're rocking it as grandparents. I'm just saying. Music has strengthened our patriotism for really every country, but for us as Americans, when we sing the Star-Spangled Banner or America the Beautiful, it moves something in us. It stirs in us. Music gave the African-American community a common bond and a way to embrace hope when they were enslaved and oppressed. Spirituals were sung in the fields together as a powerful reminder that God had not forgotten them, that God was not through with them. I thought about this when I was a kid. This is before, streaming and all that stuff. My mom made a huge deal every year about The Wizard of Oz. It came on once a year. I don't know, we made like this huge deal about it. We planned for it and the whole bit. And when Dorothy sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Blue Birds Fly, I always thought the song was about the fantasy of Oz and her memory of Kansas where she was not anymore. But did you know, Dorothy's song was originally written by Jews who were dreaming of a new future. Now, they wrote it before World War II. But then, during Hitler's final solution, Jews would sing together, "Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops, away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me." The chimney tops that billowed plumes of smoke from the crematoriums where millions of Jews were incinerated. I don't know about you, but I'll never hear that song the same way again. Music is like that. It's just powerful. It does something to us. It's spoken the voice of advancement and upheaval and unrest and war and victory. Music has shaped our culture, the very fabric of who we are. It's defined every generation, and importantly, it's been a cornerstone of the church and of people of faith since our earliest memories when humans looked to the heavens and wondered about something divine. Did you know in the Bible, when you read the book of Psalms, that most of the Psalms are actually songs? If in some Bibles you get this notation in front of each one of them, or many of them anyway, like Psalm 4, for the director of music with stringed instruments. Psalm 5, for the director of music for pipes, the ancient version, not the more modern kind. In Psalm 9, for the director of music to the tune of the death of a son. So he even relates it to the score that would be played behind the lyrics. In Israel's history, when the Israelites were delivered from slavery, Miriam, that would be Moses' sister, she wrote a song, aptly called Miriam's Song. You can read about it. It's in Exodus chapter 15. When Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary, was visited by the angel and was told that she would play an important part in the plan that God had to rescue humanity, she wrote a song. The words to that song you can read in Luke chapter 1. They say, it begins, "My soul glorifies the Lord, my spirit rejoices in God my Savior." We call it Mary's song. Early followers of Jesus were instructed to be filled with the Spirit as you sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to one another, singing and making melody to the Lord in your hearts. Music, it's not just something that we do. It's not a modern invention. It's not even a current spiritual practice alone. It dates back all the way to the beginning of people of faith. It's not just a part of our church, it's a part of the church. And embedded in the songs that you and I often sing when you come to church, and sometimes outside of church, are these incredibly powerful, life-changing stories from the pages of the Bible. And those stories have an effect on us, even if we don't realize it, and often we don't know it. So we decided to do this series that works backwards. We're going to take a few of the songs that we commonly sing around here today, and we're going to dissect them so that when we sing them, we will understand them. Now, for a few of us, this will sound like review, but I have to tell you, as I studied for this series, as I've listened to the ideas that we put on the table and talked about these songs, I've learned some things I didn't know. For many of us, our eyes are about to be opened. Today, we're going to unpack the song, or at least some of the song that was just done here, Rattle. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the praise, make a dead man walk again. From this and some other lyrics, you might think that what we're singing about is the resurrection of Jesus. Saturday was silent, surely it was through, but since when has impossible ever stopped you? Friday's disappointment is Sunday's empty tomb. Since when has impossible ever stopped you? It's an Easter song, right? Well, it is. And also, the song definitely links to another story in the Bible that is perhaps a precursor to the resurrection of Jesus, a story that, frankly, I'd never linked with the resurrection of Jesus before. See, in between the time that Jesus died and the time that he rose again, everybody around him, everybody who was a follower of Jesus, during that period between crucifixion and resurrection, they were in dismay, discouraged, disillusionment. All hope was gone for them. They put all their trust and hope in Jesus, and now he was dead. And yet, since when has impossible ever stopped God? So the story of Rattle is about the resurrection, but it also links to another story in the Bible, again, a story I'd never linked before. It comes out of the book of Ezekiel, and I want to give you a little background. So listen, just stay with me for a minute. I got to take you to a place so that you can understand the setup, and then we can get to something more practical. Just stay with me. The people of God, for a time, like think King David and Solomon, they experienced a season when they had it all. They literally had it all. God had divinely given them this special land, the land where Israel, the nation, exists today. That God had given them a kingdom and his favor and his divine protection. Life was good. It was so good. It was one of those seasons where everybody would say something like, it just doesn't get any better than this. That's one of my dad's favorite phrases. I've sort of adopted it. And I use it to remind me when seasons are good, or when life is really good, or when this moment is really good, I use it to tell myself, just stay right here, man. Just stay right here. Don't leap to the next thing, that whatever you got coming around there, just stay right here. So if I'm fishing with a group of my friends and we just get into a mess of fish, we just start catching them, one line after another, I'll say, it just doesn't get any better than this. And when I get to be with my family and we're all together doing something fun and everybody's smiling, I'll say, it just doesn't get any better than this. Every time we have a baptism here at our church, watching these folks who've experienced dramatic, transformational level life change. And now they're going public with their faith in Jesus, who is the one who provided them this change. It never gets old to me. At every baptism I get to be a part of, at some point I say out loud, even if there's nobody standing around me, I'll say, it just doesn't get any better than this. That's the way the people of God felt. We call them the Israelites. Sometimes we call them the Jews. They thought their favor would never end. They thought this season would never end. They thought it would never get any better than this, and it would never end. But it did. Once they had it all provided by God for them, they started to question if it was God who really brought them to that place in the first place. They wondered if they really needed God at all. And they started to live like they didn't need him or know him. And so what we read in the Bible is that God gave them exactly what they wanted. Not as punishment, just as this is what you asked for, so this is what I'm going to give you. They didn't want him, so God let them live that way. Pretty soon, without God's intervention, without his favor, without his protection, they got conquered by their enemies, completely wiped out and taken over. One of those enemies was the Babylonians. This is where the history gets a little heavy. I promise I'll only hang out here for a second. The Babylonian Empire invaded and then destroyed what the Israelites valued most, the temple of God, where they understood that God dwelt here on earth. And then the Babylonians, they didn't just destroy the temple. They took the people and they exiled them. They took them to a land far away from their home, the land that God had given them. They weren't there anymore. And that's where Ezekiel comes on the scene. He's a prophet or a priest, loosely a pastor, if you think about it that way. And he's one of the leaders that got exiled. He was pulled out of the land and taken to a faraway place in 597 BC. This is one of the few dates that we actually know. He had an important ministry. His ministry lasted 23 years. He was a person of significant influence. When people wondered where God was, Ezekiel fought in his soul. He knew that God was still at work, even though they thought all hope was lost. He knew that God was still present, that God still had a plan, and significantly, Ezekiel knew God was still powerful enough to offer them hope. He felt at times like the people of God felt, like giving up. We all feel like that sometimes, but giving up was just not in Ezekiel's blood. He knew that life was fragile. He knew that life was constantly changing. He knew that he wasn't invincible, that we're not invincible. But the people of God, somehow they missed that memo. They got confident in themselves. Their pride and their ego took center stage, and that's when the fall began. It ended in complete devastation of the Jewish empire, a royal disaster. Instead of God's plan for them, which was that they would be a faithful people who trusted in God and had an established kingdom that would never end, they became literally refugees, slaves, paupers, beggars, and captives. They had lost their glory, they had lost their land, they lost their status, they lost their wealth, and most importantly, they lost all hope. And that's when Ezekiel comes in. They say, the people say, our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. They feel like they've lost everything. They feel like there's nothing left to live for. And many of us, we understand that feeling today. You get up every day and you go to war. You go to war just to make enough to pay the bills, which are slowly getting away from you. You fight to stay married. Some of us fight with the person that we're married to. We fight with a child who's strong-willed or defiant and one we don't understand. And we feel like we're slowly, every day, losing. Our bones are dried up. Our hope is gone. We are cut off. It's more than an ancient sentiment. For some of us, this is the motto, the banner for our life right now. Because if you're blessed to live long enough, there are times when all of us feel discouraged. We go through seasons where we're like that maybe. But some of us, the season goes farther. And we feel these words deeply in our soul. Our bones are dried up. Our hope is gone. We're just cut off from God, from good, from life. Our bones are dried up. Our hope is gone. We are cut off. It is certainly the banner that the Israelites wore. But God has a word for them. He wants them to know, and I believe He wants us to know, that when we are in distress, He knows. He hears our cry. He senses our situation. He sees our pain. And He has the answer. And His answer comes through His divine power, something that only God can do. So He sends a message through Ezekiel, and He does it in a very unusual way. He does it through a vision that Ezekiel has of a valley filled with dry human bones. It goes like this: the hand of the Lord was upon me. This is Ezekiel writing, so me is Ezekiel. The hand of the Lord was upon me, and He brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord. That's how we know it's a vision, and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. I think it's no accident that Ezekiel's vision happens in a valley. A valley, by definition, is surrounded by higher ground, right? Hills and mountains surround the valley. So metaphorically speaking, this was his low point. What went up has now come down. And Ezekiel finds himself in the presence of the proverbial rock bottom, where we often say you got to get before you can come back. So even the setting of his vision is depressing. And the valley is not just any valley, it's a valley filled with bones. So He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He led me back and forth. So if you see the vision now, He's pacing. And as he's pacing, he's thinking, he's pondering about these bones. And there's this observation he makes that there are a great many bones and that the bones are very dry. For life as we know it to exist, water is required. When scientists and astronomers, when they look to the planets, Mars, and so anywhere, to try to determine can life exist somewhere other than Earth, the first thing they look for is water. We can't conceive of life without water. A healthy human being can live many days without food, but can only live maybe 7 days max without water under the best of conditions. So what he's saying, I always appreciated the way he put this. He says these bones are very dry. When he says this, his observation is intended to make a point to you and me. He's saying, listen, these bones aren't a little dry. They're not mostly dry. They are very dry. They're completely dry. Life had totally, completely gone out of them. Zero water means zero life. And worse, these bones aren't a neat, assembled pile of skeletons, neatly arranged skeletons. They were disjointed, just random bones spread out in total chaos. This wasn't a valley filled with skeletons. It was scattered, very dry bones everywhere. It was almost like a tornado had ripped through a valley, found a graveyard, pulled it all out of the ground, swished it all together, and now it would be impossible to put all the bones back with the right body, which is why God's next question is so incredibly odd. God asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Oh, sovereign Lord, you alone know. Just as a quick aside here, the Son of Man, that's how Jesus sometimes referred to himself, a link I had not caught before in these two stories. Son of man, can these bones live? You ever been posed a question that was a no-win question for you? A question like if somebody asks you, there's no way that you can win no matter how you answer it, you're going to lose. Like if somebody asks me today, Pastor Brian, do you like the former president or the current one? Oh, no. Oh, no. That is a question that can only get me in trouble. It used to be we could have a reasonable conversation about our political differences and viewpoints, but that day is over, apparently. Only in the tightest circle would I dare to whisper my political convictions, because it's just a tinderbox out there. People are just waiting to pounce. And everybody seems to be gifted at misbehaving in this arena. So there's no way I'm answering that question. How about this one, fellas? Your wife walks in and she looks to you exactly like she did the day before and exactly like she did the day before that, but she asks you this question, hey, notice anything different? This is a no-win question because she implies that something in fact is different, but you, in fact, have no idea what it is. If you say no, you seem uncaring. If you try to lie your way out of it and say, absolutely, you're stunning, she'll say, really, what is different? Either way, you're in trouble. My most awesome assistant, Shelby, she controls my calendar and my whole life, and she actually puts on my calendar once a month. There's this little note. It says, tell Susan her hair looks nice, because she knows when Susan gets her hair done. And otherwise, the only way I know is when we're standing around with some people and somebody walks up, it's usually another woman, and says, hey, girl, your hair looks so good. And I always try, like, oh, yeah, I was going to tell you how, because she knows I'm lying. She knows I didn't notice. I'll tell you, this has really happened. This is really funny. When Shelby put the thing on my calendar one time and said, tell Susan your hair looks nice. And so I'm looking at my calendar, and boom, Susan gets home, and I say, hey, man, your hair really looks great. Deborah did a great job. She said, my appointment got canceled. You get points for trying. How about this question? The officer walks up to your car and says, sir, do you realize how fast you were going? If you say yes, he's going to write you a ticket. If you say no, he'll know you're lying, and he'll also still write you a ticket. Son of man, can these bones live? Ezekiel gets a no-win question from God. If he says yes, God might say, really? Well, go ahead and make it happen. I'll just watch. Or God might say, they can? How? Of course, if Ezekiel says, no, they can't live, which is probably what he's really thinking, then he's just told God that God can't do something. So he cheats. He cheats like we do. Pastor Brian, do you like the current president or the former one? Well, Jesus loves them both. Hey, you notice anything different? Yes, my love. I notice that you get more beautiful every day. Sir, do you realize how fast you were going? Yes, officer. I know that I'm going slower than the 3 people who were driving past me before you pulled me over. Son of man, can these bones live? O sovereign Lord, you alone know. Little flattery never hurts, does it? Ezekiel tries a little buttering up here. O sovereign Lord, God of all the universe, ruler of the planet, creator of the heavens and the earth, knower of all things, the Alpha and the Omega. Nobody knows the answer to that question except you, which means I have no idea. I don't know the answer to the question. That's really what he's saying here. I have no idea, but this sure does look like a job for God if I ever saw one. And then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. The word prophecy means to speak as a prophet, and a true prophet always delivers a message from God himself. So God tells Ezekiel to preach a sermon to the dead. I can relate. Not with you. I get invited to speak sometimes at other churches, and usually when I'm there, like people are leaned in and they're engaged and they're excited and their faces show it and all that stuff. But every once in a while, I get invited to some grumpy crowd, all of whom have their arms folded. No one is smiling. Every face is grimaced. They're completely constipated, and they're all glaring at me. And look, I get it. Look, we all come to church sometimes. We can just tell this is just the truth. We all come to church sometimes because we know we should, but we're torn because there's really something else we'd rather be doing or would like to do. I get that. But every once in a while, I go someplace and everybody there looks like they lost a bet. And I'll come home and Susan will say, hey, how'd it go? And I'll say something like, they were just dead. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I'm not literally preaching to the dead, but in Ezekiel's story, he is. And God says, tell the dry bones to hear the word of the Lord. This is not a reference to the Bible. We sometimes call the Bible the Word of God. This is not a reference to the Bible. It's a reference to the actual direct voice of God to them. Hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life, and then you will know that I am the Lord. That was the instruction God gave to Ezekiel. He tells Ezekiel to go talk to these scattered, disjointed valley of millions of very dry bones. Basically, God says, I want you to say, hey guys, I know you think you're dead, but God is about to bring new life. He's going to renew your flesh. He's going to put breath in your lungs. And when you're standing again, you'll know then that God is the one who can do the impossible, even bringing the dead to life again. That was the instruction. So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. And I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Their bodies now put together, they're organized. Instead of a valley of dry bones, now what we have is a morgue. Is it possible to have flesh and bones, skin and muscle, maybe even be breathing and eating and sleeping, but not really be alive? I think so. I've seen it many times, actually. The living dead, just surviving, just on autopilot, just getting by, just going through the motions, appearing to be alive on the outside, but not at all alive on the inside. I think that's what these bodies at this moment represent. God put them back together again, but there was no breath in them, no life in them. Do you know what that's like? Inside, day to day, with your kids, in your routine, in your marriage, in your spiritual life. If you're just surviving, if you're just barely keeping your head above water, just eking out an existence, the living dead, if that's you, you need to see what happens next. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, son of man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says, come, breath, from the four winds, and breathe into these slain that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them, and they came to life, and they stood up on their feet, a vast army. The word for breath is the same word for spirit. It's the same word for wind. It's all one word, the Hebrew word ruach. And it really means the soul. It really means life itself. The Spirit of God himself being breathed into these slain. Now, technically, in the vision that Ezekiel had, the slain are the Israelites of old. And the vision was powerful for them, but it was also powerful for me. I heard God speak to me through this story at a time in my life when I thought there was no way I would ever really live again. I was just going through the motions. I was just surviving. I couldn't see any hope. I couldn't find my way out of it. And it's an awful feeling, especially when you just feel like all hope is lost. In that state, metaphorically speaking, you are in the valley of the dry bones. And I know not everybody here today finds yourself there, but some of us do. You feel lifeless and without hope, and hanging on by a thread. And even if that's not you, everybody knows someone who's there, whether you realize it or not, because we're good at hiding, we're good at faking it. Can these bones live? This text has become something that makes us eternal optimists. It's a key part of the story of how we know God can do things. This story is given so that we can be sure of this. Impossible is God's favorite word. As our song cries out towards heaven, since when has impossible ever stopped you? What we see as hopeless, God sees as filled with potential. What we see as impossible is God just getting started. What we see as lifeless is revival waiting to happen. For God is looking for those who will cry out to him, who will rely on him, who will allow his ruach to infiltrate your life. And when that happens, those who were previously slain dead will stand on their feet, a vast and powerful army. Can these bones live? If you really want to experience life, you've got to allow God to breathe his ruach into you, to fall on you, to raise you to life. Can these bones live? You bet they can. Because since when has impossible ever stopped God?
Saturday was silent, surely it was through. But since when has impossible ever stopped you? The Friday's disappointment, Sunday's empty tomb. But since when has impossible ever stopped you? Yeah, this is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the praise, make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. The Pentecostal fire, stirring something new. You're not gonna run out of miracles anytime soon. Yeah, resurrection power, it runs in my veins too. Yeah, I believe there's another miracle here in this room. This is the And this is the praise, make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of troubles rattling. And my God is able to save and deliver and heal and restore anything that He wants to. Just ask the man who was thrown on the bones of Elisha if there's anything that He can't do. Just ask the stone that was rolled and the tomb in the garden what happens when God decides to move. And I feel Him moving it now. I feel Him doing it now. I feel Him doing it now. Do it now. Do it now. And this is the sound of troubles rattling. And this is the praise, make a dead man walk again. And open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. Gonna live again. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling.
Do you want to live again? You can. Your bones can live if you'll let God breathe His Spirit on you. He can raise you back to life or to a life more vibrant than you've ever known before. He can absolutely do that. The question is, can you do your part? Will you? Don't miss this opportunity. Let today be the day that you cry out to God. Lay down your lifeless existence and let Him breathe life into you. Let us know how we can help. Send me an email or submit a Connect card. And I'll see you next week for more in this series, What Did I Just Sing? Take care.